Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
As we leave the court of de Tonquéville and our werewolf knight, William Marshall, we fly northwest and hundreds of miles and years to meet the Fenrir of now and his human counterpart of this time, another Wil of another time. It has been a crazy few months in the life of our point of view pair, and we prepare to catch up with them as they wander alone on a beach somewhere on the northern coast of Scotland.
William, where else would I want to be right now? We walk on the windswept beach basking in the end of the day. The wind blows offshore at what the locals call a hell of a hoolie. The brisk blow keeps the lips of the waves from falling too early. It's been a day of perfect surf, on the perfect break, on the perfect beach, with the perfect woman. The sand after that half-assed rain shower is dry and being whipped through the air around my ankles. I close my eyes as I walk to allow myself to engage with the touch of the sand and wind. The grains trickle and trail over my skin, a pleasant feeling. My bare feet, although cold, give me great pleasure as they act as my link to the earth. All is good in this moment, a quiet moment of sensual pleasure. I stop to watch my sure four-footed friend Fenrir walk forward in front of me as I look north out to sea. His head is down and he snuffles his way along the foreshore like some big giant black dog. He's no dog, mind you. He is my best friend and wolf soul, the other half of me, a companion since I was a babe in me cot. As I stop to look at Fen, the wind tells me the story of the miles it's travelled. I close my eyes and listen. The waves trundle up the beach like an invading army. Each crashing wave is a rhythmic crescendo of the vast distance that it's travelled. The breeze brings me a sweeter smell and my nostrils flare to drink it in. The wind teases me, she does. In those salty notes and highlights are the hints of coffee and the woman that waits for me at the van. But I will not go sample them just yet. This is all and everything now. I'm grateful for this. Just this. As I look to the horizon, I watch the end of the sets we rode today. They've fallen, not what they were, but these would still be the best sets of the day in any other bay in Britain. Even the fabled beaches, reefs and breaks of the west of Cornwall do not offer the sets of the north coast of Scotland, and at this time of year we're the only ones that have been on the beach and in the water this day. Lonely waves for the lonely to enjoy. I have been to heaven, and it was no comparison to this place on this day. As I look into the distance, I see a lady and her dog appear around the headland, coming from, well, she's coming from nowhere, to be frank. I can't imagine where she managed to get in on the beach. The only access is where we're parked. She doesn't seem to offer much threat, but, my paranoia begins its little electric sparkling journey up my spine to where it dings in my brain. She's not been on the beach for very long. I would have been able to sense her. I would have noticed the tracks of her boots, smell her, hear her, and her little dog, even under these windy conditions. She smells of chocolate orange and has notes of my mum's perfume. Estee Lauder's Youth Chew. It's a blast from the past. A perfume of the 50s. An older lady, I assume. I keep walking. Fenrir jogs back to my side and he's noticed her as well. Mentally, the wolf and I converse. Who is it? I ask him. We will see, he tells me. Oh, it's like that, is it? I reply. And he just laughs. She continues to walk towards me, although the whole beach is free for her to walk upon. I do my thing. I change the angle of my wandering path away from her to the water. She changes her direction to eventually meet me on my journey. I change direction again, as does she. Bollocks. I'm going to have to speak to a person today. Eventually she cuts me off.
Hello!
She shouts as she gets closer. Her wet spaniel comes buzzing around Fen and me in circles. The spaniel was definitely the runt of the litter. Its tongue lolls from its mouth, its ears flap around it like fuck off furry flags, and they get caught at random points of the weird sideways run that the dog employs under its paws, causing it to roll and somersault, which it seems to do at random points, but shows great joy and enthusiasm in doing so. Definitely a spaniel. On its pinball journey, it stops momentarily in front of me. Just stares. It's black, bedraggled and sandy. Its head is far too small for its body, and its eyes are bulbous and crossed. One looks to the northwest and the other to the southeast. It gives a strange bark that sounds more like a whiffle and runs off sniffing in a circle, bored with me once more. I'm really not of interest to the little beast today. What the fuck? What is that? Fenrir asks. I laugh. That, my friend, is a spaniel. That is what your kind, you wolves, evolved into, I tell him. He grumpily starts to mouth away under his mental breath in disappointment. Eventually the lady is within conversation distance.
Oh, hello! How do you do? I don't often meet people on my evening walk with Mr. Pickles here,
she says. Oh, she's one of those proper Scottish rich women. She's a finer English accent than any English lady could ever have. Her family's probably owned half of Scotland since, the 12th century or something. The spaniel stops in its perpetual motion at the sound of its name to pay us attention. She laughs in response and fishes a treat out of her pocket and throws it in a perfect arc to where the dog deftly leaps into the air and completely misses the flying treat and ends up in a woofing heap on the ground.
Oh, silly!
She laughingly shouts at the dog. She's an older lady. She must be in her 60s or early 70s, but still holds a youthful beauty to her demeanour. She wears ancient but very expensive clothing. Her look and accent give me the idea that she's one of those ladies of old money. Her hair is tied back and she wears a headscarf. Her jacket is tweed and a man's, and it looks like it's choked many a hungry moth to death throughout the centuries. Hi, is the limit of my greeting. I try to start walking again, offering her the chance to accept that as the whole conversation. She sadly does not and falls into pace with me on the left, interestingly on the opposite side to the giant wolf soul that walks with me. I suppose it was a 50-50 choice, so I should not read too much into that. We wander for some way in silence, an uncomfortable silence that I hoped would give the woman a hint. No hint was taken.
It's a lovely evening, is it not?
She eventually asks. I rudely nod not to offer my answer or to give her as much of an answer as she's getting. She tries again.
The wind is rather brisk, but I enjoy a bit of briskness in my outings.
She continues smiling and holding her hands behind her back. Again we walk in a little awkward silence.
Are you one of those surfing types?
She asks. I nod and show her my agreement.
I did a little as a girl. My father had captained a cruiser around the mid-Atlantic in the 70s and picked it up on one of his many journeys. Longboarding, of course. I've never been on one of these funky, I believe young people say, shortboards.
I smile. They're a lot of fun, and the waves here are incredible.
Well, if I were...
She starts. I, at this point, butt into her sentence. How are you, Lucy? Fur, I ask her. The lady instantly changes into an incredibly beautiful woman in her 30s. Again, as always, I ask you to imagine your perfect woman, whatever your sexual preference, sexuality or pronouns. It's just imagine a perfect woman. That is how Lucy looks right now. She would be the highlight in my dreams tonight, and I'm not describing her for you. You can already see her. She's now dressed in modern outdoor clothing and moves as she has some sort of cat's back in her DNA, somewhere in her family tree.
What gave it away?
She asks. I can hear the disappointment pretty clearly in her voice. I stop and turn round and motion into the path we've just taken. She turns to look where I point. She shows a lot of confusion.
What?
She asks. The parable of Christ on the beach, I tell her. She looks bemused.
Okay. And?
You don't have any footprints, I tell her. She laughs.
Ah, I see.
Not that you would carry me in my times of need, would you? I ask. She shakes her head.
Probably not.
She smiles. Also, the disguise was good except for the red-soled Christian Louboutin wellies. I don't know if they're made, but I don't think a Scottish lady of her vintage would have been wearing them, would she? I tell her.
Ah, yes. But you know me. A dash of the designer.
She smiles. I do, I tell her. The spaniel has calmed down and sits watching us at a distance. Well, I think it's watching us. Who knows with those eyes? I point at Mr. Pickles. All right, what on earth is that thing then? I guess it's not a spaniel, I say. She smiles.
Ah, well, this is, Quattro Quetzal Kin Diddy. I call him Mr. Pickle. And he is a spit and sputum demon from the 3rd level of hell.
She tells me. Oh, God. My face shows the disgust of the thought. I sure am glad we can't see him in his true form then, I tell her. She starts laughing. It becomes a little bit uncontrollable and she finds breathing difficult. What? I ask her. What? I'm getting annoyed.
I'm sorry.
She laughs again.
I'm sorry.
She repeats as she's bent double. What is so funny, for God's sake? I say. She stops laughing instantly at the G word and stands up looking affronted.
Hey, no need to blaspheme, Will.
She warns me with her eyes deadly serious before she smirks.
That really is what he looks like.
Oh. I must have shown a little surprise because she started a little chuckle once more. What do you want, Lucy? I ask her.
Well, Will, frankly, I'm a little bored.
She tells me coyly while stroking me with the tip of her index finger of her right hand on the chest. I look into those eyes, those beautiful, soulless eyes. I see the piece is going to be short-lived then. It seems it's at least going to end today or, well, soon. It will end soon. I'm going to get back to being Mr. Angry soon. I'm going to be angry and petty. I'm going to be angry, petty and bloody-minded. I've been fooled and I've had my life destroyed. It's time to get back to doing what I'm good at. Revenge. Destruction. But for now, I'll relax.
The Professor. Eventually, you have to give up trying to kill yourself when you can't. I spent 3 months in Phaeton at the eponymous hotel and drinking den that resides in that little village on the edge of reality. As you may or may not know, I was a great knight in the Middle Ages, Simon de Montfort. I was the 6th Earl of Leicester and a bit of a bastard, to be sure. I had cruelty in my bones and based that cruelty on my work for Christ and his Father. This meant that I was a killer for God, which is a bit of a problematic premise if you think about it. In a state of panic for my soul, I had led a quest for the Holy Grail. Oh, I have to say I found it, and yes, I became immortal. But that in itself is an episode or 6. The Lord had given me a chance to make things right on Earth, to protect the outcasts, you see. In this case, a different set of outcasts than those I'd once persecuted. The things I had to protect were those supernatural beasties that still roamed the earth. I have to say, it was one hell of a job that broke me every now and again. It really was. A lot. My time recently with a certain werewolf and our clash with Lucifer the Lightbringer had done just that. It broke my spirit for a while. I'd lied and damaged the trust of a man who'd become a friend. True friends are rare, and I've hurt something special there. In the name of the Lord, I had... Sorry for the use of the language here, but I'd fucked up something that had been good. What utter pish God's will oft appears to be. So, how did I deal with the issue that I'd created, you may wonder? I dealt with it in the manner of the men of many past generations. Well, I suppose that could only be expected, as I am the man of many past generations. Many, many generations. More than I can count on the fingers of both hands, anyway. So, following an acceptable historical path, I obliterated myself in an orgy of drink and drugs. I know, not the best coping strategy, but sometimes you have to wallow in your misery for a while before moving forward. If you can move forward, that is. I mean, sometimes the wallow becomes terminal. Some lucky bastards can kill themselves. Some people can have the welcome knowledge that they do not have to cope with the hurt and despair forever. I believe in the Stoic ideas and ideals. Most people had the ability to take their own life if their struggle was too much. I was not able to have the comfort of that path out of this. In modern times, you're not supposed to see the taking of your own life as a comfort, but hear me out. It is a blessing for one who cannot. Don't get me wrong, you don't have to do it, but you do have the blessed option of being able to escape if you want. I don't have that option. When I kill myself, I just reappear a few moments later, often embarrassed. I really was hurting, and in a case like that, sometimes you need help. And in this case, that had been Bosworth at his fairy bar, and that's fairy with an E. I don't know why, but that E and not an I is really important to these fae folk. Please don't get me wrong. Bosworth, the retired genie, you understand, now landlord of the Phaeton Arms, did not support me in my attempt at self-destruction. He did not enjoy the fact that I was trying to do the impossible in destroying myself. He just knew me well enough to allow me to get it out of my system. He also realized that my credit accrued over the years was good. I'd lived a few centuries and had the money that befits that period of living. Not only was I a professor, knight and raconteur, but I was also a great investor, so I could pay for my use of fairy dust, gnomic mushrooms, and my particular favourite, fine malt whiskey. That's whiskey without an E. I woke into a dry-mouthed, headache-filled world. Again. My mouth felt like something dead had found a way to crawl inside it and then died again, probably asphyxiating from the stench of my acrid breath. My head was full of swinging hammers that bounced off the inner walls of my skull. My eyes were gooey, and yet, at the same time, crusty, burning pits of pain. The tiny amount of daylight that had got through the crack in the curtains was enough to cause massive discomfort. Another day in paradise, I thought. I had no gratitude for this morning. After processing the wants of my body and mind, my body's needs made themselves evident under the pressure of my overly full bladder. I sat up in my now stinking pit of iniquity, a bed of spills, crumbs, boxes, bottles, and more apparent than those things, my abject misery. I briefly caught a snapshot of myself in the wardrobe mirror. My body had broken down over the past few months. I had a little pot belly and was thoroughly out of the shape I usually kept myself in. I was unshaven and my hair was a greasy mess. For a moment, I cared. And then I shrugged and laughed at the empty room. I didn't care, and I turned away from the image of the derelict in the mirror. Smacking my lips, I looked around for my medicine to treat the hangover. Hair of the dog, what bitcher? More booze. There were bottles cast about the room. 2 whiskey bottles sat on the bedside table. Only one had some forget the world liquid left. The bottle was half empty. Half empty? I'm sure a psychologist would read something or other into that statement. Half empty. Am I a pessimist? Not at this moment. I am way beyond that. I am my own personal laticist. I want to watch my life spiral into a disaster. I must admit, I was doing pretty well, and the discipline I was employing to do the destroying would have impressed any top athlete. I tried to focus on the table, and then the label. The label said, it didn't matter. Forget focusing. Who needs eyes that can do that anyway? Then the realization hit me like a spade in the face. I was undeserving of such a fine malt. I have an utter dislike of moments of epiphany. They only lead to hard work. Through more focused eyes, I looked at the fairy dust lines prepared last night for this morning, which would bring me back into an existence of some sort. I was disgusted by them. Oh, you laugh at the lines of fairy dust as though the name fairy makes it sound weak. But let me tell you, cocaine is nothing in comparison to the dust that the little fairies use to make them fly. Cocaine is known as Colombian marching powder. Fairy dust, well, it makes you bloody fly, all right? Something in my head had clicked. Looking at the perfect little lines, something changed in that very moment. Oh, damn it. Reason had struck my forebrain. I just now needed to convince my amygdala. That animal part of me partially rallied as it fought to snort the dust, its reasoning being that it would give me the stolen vitality to think. But no. I swept the dust from the surface. It formed a cloud in the air, a sparkling, glittery cloud. Well, it was fairy dust after all. I sat for some time and watched it fall and settle. A fight was going on in my head. A fight for an unfugged brain. There's so much comfort in not being present. I reached for my mobile in the bedside drawer. I turned it on and waited for it to boot up. Once working, it showed the battery to be at 3%. It had been utterly ignored for weeks. I sighed. It would take hours to catch up with everyone and everything. Hours that would have to be found, but first, the priority to move on. In my grief. Looking through my contacts, I found the number I wanted. William Wood, Kensington House. It was time to go to rehab. It was time to go to the Priory and get sober. The mysterious Dr. Wood had helped me out numerous times in the past. One more wouldn't hurt, would it? It was time to take on my most challenging opponent. Time to fight me. Tally-ho! And here we go.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.